To find out more about what the future holds for the Jaffna and the northern Muslims, Tarika spoke to Mirak Raheem from the Center for Policy Alternatives.
Now it's been 18 years since the Muslims were evicted from the north. What is their status as a community today? Where are they?
The largest number of the northern Muslims following their eviction eventually moved into Puttalam, but there's pockets of population in places like Kurunegala, Pulonnaru and Radhapura, Colombo. So the large bulk of them continue to be in displacement. Some of them have tried to settle into various communities, others continue to live in welfare camps, and that forms the largest population. But a few of them over the years, since as early as '92, have tried to go back and resettle into areas like Man Island, Jaffna, Vaunia. So you have still small pockets of the population who've tried to resettle, but in general, most of them continue to live in displacement.
Now for many years, this community has wanted more than anything else to return to their homes and villages. Is this still the case?
Yes, there is a really deep-seated kind of desire to try and go back to their homes and back to their communities and rebuild their lives. That remains. The big obstacle that they face is really the situation, the context of war. And one of the big challenges that they will bring up when you talk to them in interviews will always be that their fear of the war and their fear of being re-evicted. And so long as there's no real guarantees for their sustainable return and resettlement, that they won't return. So there's this huge obstacle, and there's no way around it really.
Okay, and now many long-time displaced families have agreed to resettlement. What are the main challenges in this regard, and how are they being addressed?
Basically, at the moment, there is the issue of the war, obviously, and currently the solution is a military solution that has been pushed forward by the government. But the community is still, it's at a wait-and-see approach to what to do. So in one sense, they're really waiting for a macro-political solution. But at the same time, there are pressures to resettle because, as you know, certain areas of the north have now been, the LTT has been forced to withdraw from those areas, and they've been opened up to resettlement, or they're hoping, the government is hoping to open them up. And so then in that sense, when those areas open up, there will obviously be a pressure on the communities to try. But again, there's this underlying feeling because these are communities which have experienced war over, 2 decades. And so there is always this expectation that this is just another phase of the war. And so in that sense, people are so used to the war, peace, that they're really not willing to kind of gamble on their lives to go and resettle and then face redisplacement. So it's really that, like the whole macro-political situation that is a big obstacle.
And can you tell me a little bit about your own work in connection with these Jaffna Muslims?
Yeah. It's basically the Muslims of the 5 districts of the north, Jaffna, Mana, Kilinochchi, Mullaitivu and Vaunia. The organization I work with, which is the Center for Policy Alternatives, we have basically been working on issues of displacement, humanitarian issues over the last 10 years. And what we've tried to do through the work is basically do research, so to try and highlight what are the key underlying issues that these communities face. And second is to try and do advocacy around it. So suggest policy proposals to take up by the government, humanitarian actors, at the same time do litigation on behalf of the displacement communities. And it's work like that. And so personally, that's what I also try and work in, to try and find ways of put forward options which would help both the community in displacement and the host community in Puttalam, plus also try and suggest solutions of what could be done in terms of helping the displaced community return. And I think one critical thing is to keep that issue on the agenda, because I think in a sense, like the northern Muslims, and you can say the displaced communities at large throughout the northeast and even the border areas, that there's a lot of, as movements and developments take on, there's a lot of challenge in actually trying to keep their issues on the table, because the media attention goes up and goes down, and it's to try and also keep the policymakers' interest in the issue and to work on the structural issues about rations, making sure that rations are improved and they're not the 1995 cost, which is what they currently are, and try and find ways of improving people's facilities, basic services, things like that.
Okay, and finally, going by past experience, How do you see the Muslim community's role and involvement in the resolution of the conflicts, assuming that the current context of the conflict will be behind us soon or even later?
Yeah. What is clear is that when you speak to members of the community, I was explaining how they always feel like this is just another phase of the war. And I think there's no way of escaping that political solution, that there are ways of trying to find political alliances with existing political actors in order to avoid a political solution. But there's this almost like a sense that people have that one has to find another way of addressing the conflict, because characters might change, like current political leaders, that might change, but the overall political structure, something has to change. And there is that sense that it's not just about, I think, ultimately a military solution and that's that, because people know they have to return to their communities, they have to live with their Tamil neighbors, and they have to live in a workable arrangement, and part of that arrangement is a political solution. So people will always talk about, it's not just about the military solution, that there's a lot more which has to go on. So like even in the East, I think it's a larger issue that there has to be work on in terms of reconciliation. We can't just assume that because the area has been liberated, then everything gets back to normal, because these communities have really been disrupted. Relations have been really put at so much strain that you have to find ways of rebuilding it. Political solution, finding community linkages, really strengthening civil society, and I don't mean just NGOs, but even the church, mosque committees, creating a space for them to be able to take up community issues and to negotiate with political actors. But at the current context, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of intimidation, and that's a huge obstacle to also helping communities help themselves.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me.